everybody. Welcome and thank you for joining us for S.A.L.T. And today, it's all Miranda.
Right. He thinks he's so funny all the time. But,
I am funny.
But he's not. You can tell him he's not.
I'm hilarious. I'm so funny. Yes. So, I didn't plan anything to say. So, I'm Brett. This is Miranda.
Oh, hello.
We're married.
Yes. I think they assumed that.
People know. First time they're watching. And...
Well, welcome if this is the first time you're watching.
And, Miranda really doesn't surprise me very much, but she did today.
What did I do?
What did you do? What did you surprise me?
Nothing that I know of.
Miranda knows what a Hemi is.
Yes.
That's impressive.
All right.
That's impressive knowledge. How do you know what a Hemi is? Where did you learn what a Hemi is?
Oh, I saw it and heard about it. Yeah, they're fast, and I like fast cars.
Well, that's probably why something she surprised me with a while back. I like fast cars because you would not be able to tell it from most of the time the way she drives. It's a test of my patience. She'll sit behind a truck for a mile when she could have passed it easily, but no, let's just meander around. Oh, look at the pretty trees.
That's because in 2 miles, I'm going to have to exit off. And it's busy traffic, and...
Boy, sometimes when she gets on the highway or something, she can floor it and just like zoom. And I'm like, what are you doing? Where's my wife? Who are you?
I don't know what he's talking about.
And you like the Baja because it had a turbo in it.
A turbo and a 5-speed.
Yes.
Oh, that was fun. Sadly, the car was a lemon.
Did you know they're going to stop making stick shifts?
No, they can't.
I read that.
Oh, because I want one again.
They're phasing out stick shifts. I love stick, and they're going to stop making them.
They're just so much fun to drive. They're so much more fun to drive than an automatic.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they're cheaper to fix, by the way. And I don't know why. I guess people just aren't buying them anymore, but they're going to stop making stick shifts.
No, it means we'll have to buy an old used car.
So if you like stick shifts like we like stick shifts, write to your congressman, your senator, and demand equal justice for stick shifts.
That's right. We need them.
We need them. Our children should learn how to drive stick shifts.
That's right. It's good, coordination or some such thing.
Aspen is such a good student. She has raised her hand to say something.
This is about the only time I've raised my hand in the last 3 weeks.
Yes, well.
But Leigh Bradley is in support of... Who do you think?
Me.
No.
Leigh is in support of me. Thank you, Leigh. No?
She said smart lady.
Smart lady.
Mm-hmm.
That must be you.
That's right. Just stay in the right lane.
Stay right in the right lane with your Hemi. Anyway, before this digresses any further, we have one of Aspen's videos to show you. We show a lot of Aspen's object lesson videos.
Oh, and thank you, Leigh. Thank you.
And thank you, Leigh, for Miranda. And we're going to show her video, and then we'll talk about what we're going to be discussing today. But first, let's go to Aspen's object lessons.
Today, we're talking about space travel. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. When you think of space travel, you probably think of what you've seen in TV and movies.
fleet.
Tracking target drones.
And whether it's the Enterprise, an X-Wing fighter, a moon-based Alpha Eagle, or even the Rockhopper, those all fly in space using constant power. But, big surprise, that's not really how it works. So to learn how flying through space actually works, we're going to look at how NASA figured out how to get from the Earth to the Moon and back. December 12, 1972 was the last time any person walked on the Moon. And that was the Apollo 17 mission commander, Eugene Cernan. And we haven't been back to the Moon since, until NASA's new manned mission to the Moon called Artemis. We've come a long way since the early days of the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo missions. But one thing that the Artemis missions will use from the Apollo missions is the trajectory and navigation from getting to the Earth, to the Moon, and back. But they won't be getting there flying straight and fast like the Millennium Falcon. They'll be using the two things that will really get you going through space: thrust and gravity. You see, traveling through space isn't like a bullet from a gun. It's more like throwing a ball to a friend. When you're playing catch, you usually throw the ball with a little bit of an arc. Without realizing it, you're taking into account thrust, how hard you throw the ball, and gravity, where the ball comes down. Now say your friend is moving. You're not going to throw the ball where they're at, you're going to throw the ball where they're going to be. And that is a lot more like how NASA got to the Moon, rather than Enterprise jumping to Warp 9.
Engage.
Now there's a lot involved in flying a spaceship from the Earth to the Moon and back, but we're going to look at the 5 most important navigational points that NASA has to hit in order to get an astronaut from the Earth to the Moon and back safely. Navigational point number 1. The launch is probably the most important, because without it, the rest wouldn't happen. And launches can go very smoothly, not so smoothly.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ignition.
We'll assume we had a very smooth launch and head on to navigational point number 2. You might think that when they launch a rocket, it goes straight from the Earth, straight to the Moon. But that's not actually how it happens, is it? Remember our playing catch analogy? That's where this happens. Astronauts have to travel 238,900 miles to get to the Moon. Translunar injection is where they line the spaceship up to where the Moon is going to be when they get there, not where the Moon is when they're lining it up. And if that goes well, then they don't jump into hyperdrive. They just burn their engines for a few minutes and then coast their way on to navigational point number 3. Navigational point number 3 is where they slow down, lower their altitude, go into a symmetrical lunar orbit so they can land safely. Once they get to the Moon, if they don't adjust their speed and altitude, they'll just fly right by and watch the Moon go by through the window and head straight to the Sun.
Where they'll slingshot around and go into time warp and go back in time to save whales.
No. So once they've had a chance to walk around and pick up some souvenirs, they jump back in the spaceship and head off to navigational point number 4.
3, 2, 1. Ignition. Right away, Houston.
Trans-Earth injection is just like trans-lunar injection, except instead of going to the moon, we're heading back to Earth. Again, they'll burn their engines just for a little bit to pick up some speed, and then they'll coast their way to navigational point number 5. Re-entry is probably the most crucial, because if you get it wrong just by a little bit, you'll be watching the Earth pass you by. One thing the astronauts could rely on is that NASA had this all figured out way before they actually got into the rocket to blast off. And then, they trusted NASA's information on each point along the way to get them there and back safely. And just like how the astronauts had faith in NASA for their journey, we have faith in God for our journey. We have navigational points in our lives too, that God has already worked out all the details. Like it says in Ephesians 2:10, "For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do." So blast off on the adventure of your life and know that God is taking you here, there, and everywhere, and all the way home.
Daddy can't have any.
All right.
Daddy cannot have any sparkling apple cider.
I was like, are you with us? Because Mom was like, So that happens when you talk off camera about other stuff.
Yeah, about other stuff.
Yes. And I can't have any sparkling apple cider. It's sad. Now I can have water and flavored water with no sugar or carbs.
Yeah, artificially flavored, colored.
So good for you. Yum, yum, yum. Anyway, so, what are we talking about today, Miranda?
Wait, aren't you going to wrap up this egg?
Oh, so,
Yes.
we showed
Why we watched
the
it.
video. So, yeah, one of the things about NASA, it's been in the news lately, if you followed the new, the program Artemis trying to get back to the moon, and it's been on and off schedule, with delays and everything, and I saw it in the news this week, they're back on schedule, and that's one of the things Aspen was talking about. And way back in the day, when the space race first started, NASA had no idea how to get to the moon, and they had a lot of ideas about things, and they had methods, and they had, programs and things they used, but none of them would get them to the moon, and they had to leave behind their way of doing things and their preconceived ideas if they were ever going to, get from the Earth to the moon. Had they not been able to let some of that stuff go and move past it and, envision past it, we'd have never gotten to the moon. And that kind of relates to what we're talking to today. What are we talking about today, Miranda? Is that better?
Yeah. Yes. Okay, so what we're talking about is the unforgiving servant, unforgiveness, of course, and leaving the past in the past, or we are likely to become a part of it and just stay there.
Leaving the past in the past. And as Aspen perks up this picture of me in the past, I think it would have been so easy for me to have stayed in the past because, as you can see, I was really all that and cool in the past. Just look at that hip, cool guy.
Yeah, as they're looking at the hip cool guy, what they missed was Aspen putting some sparkling apple cider in the fridge to be cold for her and I to drink for dinner.
Yes. and then had to run over. And I
Yes,
said,
and slide on the...
yes.
Yes.
Although if Miranda met me back then when I looked like that, she probably wouldn't have talked to me. So that's
That's not true.
It's true. You would have like, he's a jerk. I can just tell from a distance. But I wasn't. I was cool. Anyway, now's the time where Aspen takes that picture down and we move on.
Okay. So basically there's nothing wrong with taking things from the past with us into the future.
Unless it's clothes from the 80s.
Well,
Thank you very
that's
much.
True. Oh my goodness.
She says that and she's a hypocrite because she wouldn't let me keep my 80s clothes.
What? That's right. I no hypocrite. I said you shouldn't be keeping your clothes from the 80s.
Right. Never mind.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess
I
she was
don't have
right.
any of mine left.
That's true.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So anyways, there's nothing wrong with taking the good truths and stuff that we learn and God shares with us into the future, because those truths, when we start living them out, they create the path that God wants us to walk on. But when we insist on living in the past, basically, and living things that aren't true, allegorically speaking, that kind of lies. It binds us in chains, basically, and throws us into a prison.
When you started talking about what we're doing, it made me think of the Bruce Springsteen song "Glory Days." Like the prison you could be talking about is you get so tied to your success in the past and somehow that prison is trying to stay in that place and relive those and just you can't move beyond it, and your memories sort of become your prison walls.
Oh, that's true, right? Huh? But also take, for example, a biblical example would be Lot's wife. You know, she turned around to look at the past, and she certainly became a part of it. Now, a more modern day example.
Wait, are you moving past Lot?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
That's all you're going to say?
That's all I was going to say.
So, one of the things about Lot's, that whole story is, the Bible's claim of Sodom and Gomorrah. And for skeptics, a lot of people, skeptics and historians, like, well, there's no proof that any of these cities ever existed, So the Bible says there was Sodom and Gomorrah and it was destroyed by, brimstone, it's just a fairy tale. And because there's no archaeological evidence. And it's been probably 30, 40 years now. But there were some historical archaeologists who used references from the Bible, not so much in a religious sense, but they would use their references to try and match to archaeological sites and digs and stuff. And they weren't trying to prove the Bible, but they did find that there were things in the Old Testament, in the Bible, that they could match to things they discovered. Turned out, trying to figure out, they looked at some of the things they had found that the Bible mentioned, and they came up with a grid that said, well, if there was a Sodom and Gomorrah, these cities would have been somewhere over here. And it was, I think, just south of the Dead Sea. And so they did some radar imaging, and sure enough, they found these ruins buried. One of them was actually underwater at one point, and they started excavating, and so they found these homes and these palaces that had been burnt, and pottery shards and stuff that had been exposed to extreme heat. And one way back then, one of the guys, he did this survey, and he analyzed all the stuff they were finding, and without any reference or connection to the Bible or anything, he came up with a theory that it looked like there had been some sort of exploding meteor or something that exploded over the cities, close by, and incinerated the cities, which could be the same as fire and brimstone. And then it was only later these guys took what he had found and put it together, and they, found Sodom and Gomorrah. And the big mystery was why they turned out to be these huge cultural cities of the day, and yet then once they had their demise, the whole area was abandoned for like 3,000, 4,000 years. And why? And then if you take the biblical account, it explains why, with the fire and the brimstone and the destruction. That's why they, it was so devastated and burnt that, it took that long to recover and for people to go back. But it's, again, archaeology and history kind of catches up to some stuff in the Bible, and without trying to prove it, proves stories in the Bible, which just kind of gives you, it just enhances your faith. That you can accept these things, these stories by faith. But when you're talking about Lot and everything, one of the things about it is very salty. It's very there's a scientific word for it, but it's salty in that area. And they even have a picture. I didn't get it. They have a picture of one of these pillars of salt, and they can look very much like people. But Lot and his whole family had found such success in Sodom, they didn't want to leave. That always bothered me about the story, that where have we lived that we just did not want to leave? Badly enough that if angels came and said, you need to move, that we were like, no, we're going to stay here. I know. Nebraska, the beautiful state.
Oh, let's hope no Nebraskans are watching us. It wasn't the people, just cornfield after cornfield, which is good, actually.
Yeah, that was the picture.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Yes.
And
corn is good for a lot of things.
Yeah.
But not for a beautiful Sabbath afternoon drive.
No, not. Oh, they did find in the ruins, they found architecture of Mycenaeans and another culture that was big in the time, and because the Bible talks about homosexuality and being one of the reasons for Sodom and Gomorrah, but they practiced that religious, like part of their religion, and so there was all these pieces that came together that really showed evidence that really did happen. Yeah, and then that was one of those, Lot's wife. It's kind of the extreme example of don't look back. She was clinging to that, because Lot had status. He was, sat at the city gate, so he was, somebody of importance. So the family was important. They had societal impact. They had money. And she just couldn't leave all it behind.
Yeah, well, I'm sure she had friends, and her two sons.
Daughters.
The sons stayed in the city,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, the sons were left behind and such. So that would have been hard, but they were not to look back to the past. So to put a more modern day story with this, so we can apply it to our own daily lives. A friend of mine, she's working at the same place for any number of years by now, and one of her coworkers, she had been friends with her before she started working there. And after a while, she kind of got to the place where she didn't really respect her friend's work ethic. But, she, for the most part, she overlooked it. She didn't say anything. But it still would grate on her every now and again. And so it's one of those things where, speaking from personal experience, you don't really always leave that in the past. You just kind of take it with you, and it keeps piling up and piling up. Anyway, so fairly recently, they had a unmeeting of the minds, basically, and she shared with her coworker what she thought of her work ethic, and of course she felt really bad about that. The next day she went ahead and she apologized to her, but when she was talking to me about it, she said, one, I can't believe I said that, and where on earth did it come from? Well, now, I'm just going to speak from personal experience because I can't say for sure what happened to her, but from personal experience in situations like that, it's basically stuff that has piled up. And while we can live without anger at the moment over it, we haven't really forgiven them. We're frustrated at, like she was at her frustrated of her work ethic and stuff. She wasn't leaving it in the past. As the days went by, she kept dragging all of that stuff with her. So when this moment came where she was really frustrated, poof, that suitcase of stuff just kind of popped open, And she shared words that in the end she wished she wouldn't have. And
that's like it is for all of us. We have a built-in, we have a built-in ecosystem in our brain of stuff that if we keep it there and we hold on to it without expressing it, it kind of goes around and around in circles, and little things can become bigger and bigger and bigger, like when we hold on to anger or frustration or something, and without expressing it, without the expression of it in some way, it just gets, big and monstrous, and then sometimes it explodes. That's why therapists and counselors will tell you, to release your anger, talk about things, don't hold things back, because when you do, when you internalize this stuff, it just builds and builds until finally something totally unrelated will pop that bubble, and boom, you just explode. And sometimes it's at the person, sometimes it's at somebody had nothing to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
And, but that's what in addiction, that's what happens. All they think about is, the good feeling they had the last time they drank or took that drug or whatever, and that just goes over and over and over and over, and just until they just have to do it again, right? Or resentment. Resentment is that thing that you just go over and over, and the more you, ruminate about it without expressing it to somebody, then, it just builds and builds and builds and gets deeper and deeper and deeper. And that's why they say resentment is the poison I take to kill you, because it just eats you up on the inside, and the other person has no idea what's going on because you haven't said anything. So it's always a better idea to express something in the moment, or when you feel like you can, and not, hold on to it or hold back, because you could probably verbalize it better in the moment or at the time than you can, when you explode on somebody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so basically we need to leave that kind of past in the past, or we end up becoming part of it. And it's generally not a pleasant experience, as the unforgiving servant discovered. So basically the unforgiving servant parable is about forgiveness. It starts with Peter asking Jesus, how many times should I forgive my brother who sins against me?
Oh, yeah, I was going to talk about that.
Okay.
I forgot what I was going to say.
Okay,
But it was something about, darn it.
Okay.
Because there is a formula, like Peter was being generous. The
Right.
Pharisaical formula
Was 3 times.
3 times, yeah.
3 times.
And so
Well,
Peter was being even more generous by saying 7 times, and that would have been like, out of this world crazy generous, back in that day. Culture's having 7 times, and the other guy's like, no, not 7, maybe 4, if you're feeling generous. But 7 was like, whoa, you gotta stop getting crazy there, Peter.
Yeah, and so, but Jesus is like, no, not 7. 70 times 7. So this is how the parable starts. And it ends with Jesus saying that God would not forgive us if we do not forgive from the heart those who sin against us. And sometimes we think maybe we've forgiven and left it in the past, but unless we've done it from the heart, we are actually taking it with us, and that's when it explodes. Just because we aren't angry about it at the moment doesn't mean that we have necessarily forgiven.
Yeah.
Because if we can, if when the person does it again, we bring up the past 25 times that they've done it, then no, we have not forgiven them.
Yeah. Yeah, and don't do the math, 70 times 7, that wasn't Jesus' point. It was sort of a tongue-in-cheek, sarcastic, using Peter's own words, because, no, not 7, but 70 times 7. And then, Peter's like, what? And then Jesus tells a story. So it wasn't a certain number. It was like, you should always forgive. Let me explain with a parable. Perhaps a parable to plainly explain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what happens is he says there's a king who decides to settle accounts with his servants, and this one servant is brought before him, and he owes him 10,000 talents. And now there's no way this guy is going to be able to pay it. So the king says, well, you know what we're going to do? We're going to sell you, going to sell your wife, going to sell your kids, going to sell all your stuff, and that will make the payment on what you owe me. And the servant, he falls down before the king and he says, oh, please have patience with me and I'll pay you all that I owe you. And the king, he had compassion on the man, and he says, release him. And he forgave him all of his debt. Now, when the servant left the presence of the king, he should have remembered how the king shared his compassion with him and how he was an example and forgave all this debt. But when he ran into a fellow servant of his, and this servant owed him 100 denarii, and he grabs him by the throat, and he says, "Pay me now." And the guy says, he falls at his feet. He says, "I can't pay you right now. Please have patience with me, and I will pay it all back to you." Now, you know what? This is where the man needed to leave the past in the past, right? He should have followed the example of the king, but he didn't. He also did not have patience, right? Now, I'm going to make a guess that this guy had possibly owed him money for some time, and maybe he had even gone out of his way to avoid paying him. I don't know, but whatever it was, the other guy, the unforgiving servant, he may very well have gone over this in his mind, thinking, how dare he avoid me like that? He owes me that money and he's going to pay it. Well, you know what I'm going to do if he doesn't pay it? Oh, just you wait till I got my hands on him. I'm going to make sure he gets thrown into prison until he pays me every last dollar that he owes me. It's not unreasonable to think that he could have had those thoughts. And so when the moment came, that's what he did, right? So
one thing about the story, though, is you know, of course, Jesus is telling the story. It's a parable. It's interesting that, you know, the one guy owed the king tons of money. You know, like it would have been like 10,000 denarii, and then the other guy owed him like, and then, you know, Jesus uses, and it was like, and this other guy owed him like the equivalent of $10, right? And what the one servant said to the king, you know, then when he came out and saw the guy that owed him the $10, Jesus used the exact same words that he had used. Mm-hmm. So it was like, you know, the other guy was saying the same thing that guy just said to the king. So he's making a point, like this, he's saying the same thing to you that you just said to them. You know?
And which also could be a pointing to, he said the same thing you did, now maybe you should say the same thing that I did.
Right. Yeah. So I just thought that was an interesting point of the story, you know. Mm-hmm. Exact same words, and yet you got one thing and you were the other guy, you know, and it was an insignificant amount of money. But yeah, I think it's right because, you know, you have two things. You know, one, you have this, probably did over and over in his mind, like you're saying, it was just like, this guy was money, this guy was money. And then when the king called the other guy in, it probably brought that all those, you know, times he thought about it back to the forefront of his, you know, mind. And we were talking earlier, and I was saying that when he goes out from the king, you know, there's kind of like one of two perspectives he could have had. One was like, I was just giving, you know, a lot of grace and mercy and forgiveness, and now that's in his heart, and he could have shared that with the other guy, or he didn't really, it wasn't a grace and mercy and thankfulness for that. It was like, boy, I just dodged a bullet, and therefore he didn't have that in his heart to share. He had all those memories that he'd done over and over, this guy asking him for money, thinking, well, now it's my turn, I've got to get my money back, you know. He didn't experience
a true change in his heart.
Right.
And so, you know, of course, his fellow servants saw what had happened, and they went and told the king. Now the king calls him before him again, and he says, you wicked, wicked servant. He says, you begged me and I forgave you. And the least you could have done was the very same thing for your fellow servant, but you didn't. And so he sent the man to the tormentors until he could pay off the debt. Mm-hmm. So the unfaithful servant had accepted the forgiveness of his debt, but he didn't move out of the past into a new and different way of living. He held on to it and became a part of it. You know, I wonder if he ever said, I can't believe I said that, and where did it come from? Because he no doubt had plenty of time sitting in prison to be thinking of that. Yeah. And
another point of the story, too, is, you know, because in the parable, obviously, the king, in some ways, represents God. And one of the things I think Jesus was saying was like, you know, the forgiveness that God gives to you, whatever happens on this earth can in no way come close to, the gift of forgiveness God gives you. Therefore, forgiving anybody else, the sins against you are, I don't want to say far less. I mean, because, when people wrong us, it hurts, and it's your true experience. But the debt, I guess, of people against us can't even compare to, the debt that God forgives between us and Him.
Right. I mean, when God forgives us the debt, that's our life. There's no way that when we forgive someone else, we're giving them life, life, the same kind of breathing in and out life. It no doubt makes their life better, but hopefully it makes your life better.
Well, yeah.
When we forgive someone else, our lives are better.
Miranda doesn't hold things against me anymore for years and years. Not that she ever did. But you get that in a lot of times in your family. I'm thinking of my own family, Mom and Dad and Craig and Beth and all that, and it's easy in those things to... You had many experiences growing up together and through life together, and it's easy to remember and hold on to things that, were done to you, Craig, and that how your siblings, Craig, used to torment you. But we've let those go, and we have forgiven the past, Craig. Therefore, you should feel good and grateful, and I don't feel any pride at all.
Okay, so basically...
You just whoa right past that. That was a great story.
Well, maybe you'd like to post this on Craig's Facebook page.
Yeah. He's never going to see this.
Okay. So when we don't leave the past in the past, time does move on, but we get stuck in the same place, spiritually and emotionally, not the person who God created us to be. It's like picking at a scab of a wound, and it just takes that much longer to heal. And so basically, the past is in the past. We want it to stay back there. That kind of past needs to stay there. Returning to it is much like that Bible verse that says, do not return to it like a dog returns to its vomit, because it does not become better with time. All those times we recycle it, it's not getting better. It becomes worse and more sour every time we would go back to it.
And don't step in it either.
Yeah,
especially cat vomit.
Yeah.
Miranda will now share.
Our cat almost never throws up, which is very nice of her. But when she does, it's generally in the early morning and the lights are still kind of off, and you get up to use the bathroom and you step in it.
Yep.
Cold, wet cat throw up.
Yes.
Yes. But this last time I was very kind to Kitty, and I told her I was very sad that her tummy hadn't been feeling very good, because she seemed very concerned that I had stepped in it.
Yeah, I just thought in its own way, that's kind of a interesting parable of, when we, like the Bible, that's a Bible verse, by the way, as a dog returns to a vomit, so a sinner returns to a sin. And, but that kind of gives you a little bit of a visual of that kind of experience when we go back to the past, when we live that, we step in that it never feels good. And, yeah.
No, nothing like cold, wet cat throw up. It's just,
Yeah.
And it doesn't get better anytime you step in it.
So tune into S.A.L.T. where we talk about cat vomit.
Yeah. But honestly, when we keep recycling how other people have treated us wrongly and stuff, I mean, we're just really sitting there in judgment of them. Mm-hmm. That's not our job to judge other people. That's only God's job. Mm-hmm. And it is not the easiest habit to break, but with God's help, it can be done. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, it's definitely hard to move into the future when we continue to look at the past. So we don't want to learn the hard way, like the unfaithful, unforgiving servant did, on that taking the past with him into his future
can ruin the future.
Yeah, it didn't work out so well for him.
Yeah. living in the past and being stuck in the past really can put you in prison. Really does prevent you from moving into the future, that God has for us.
Mm-hmm.
When we're always dragging that stuff with us, or really slow us down.
Keeps our lives small and focused on those small things.
Yeah.
Or God has much bigger truths for us to be living out. Much bigger places He wants us to go, and in our relationship with Him, and then our relationship, of course, with other people.
So there you go. That was our topic for today, and next week we'll be talking about something else.
Something else.
And we will keep Miranda from beating on the desk that the microphone sits on. So I apologize for the thunderous booms you've had periodically from today's broadcast.
Oh, you have no idea how much fun he's having saying
yes,
that.
Yeah.
Yes.
But
Because,
she went bam. I'm like, oh no, because we used to have lapels, and that would have been fine. But we're using a microphone on a little stand now, and it's on the desk, and it shakes like an earthquake. It's
yes, we apologize.
Yeah.
No earthquake here.
No earthquake here. We're fine for the most part. We're fine. We have 2 cats, so we're not always that fine. But yeah.
We have fine kitties.
We have 2 very different kitties.
2 very different kitties.
Yes. Oh, if you're still watching, I wanted to say something about, congratulations for the rain in Colorado, by the way. We've seen your posts, and rain is good. We've had a little bit here in Texas, and rain is good.
Mm-hmm.
So keep posting about Colorado weather. It's always kind of interesting to know what's going on where places we used to live.
Yes. Yep.
And that's what Miranda has to say about that.
When we lived in Nebraska, my sister would call me and she would tell me they're getting snow or rain or whatever it was. Pretty much guaranteed 24 hours later we would get the very same weather.
Yeah. Doesn't work that way now.
No.
Not down here in Texas. No matter what she says happened in Colorado, we just like, and it's hot here. And
Yeah.
that's pretty much it.
Yeah. Oh, you're getting snow? Oh.
It's hot here. It's December 26th. It's a snowstorm. Really? It's hot here. Anyway. All right. So, no idea for next week?
I don't either.
Okay. No idea. But
no, but something new and fun and...
Yeah.
Yeah.
You didn't get today's till, what, Thursday?
Yeah, Thursday or Friday. Thursday, Friday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So, thanks for joining us. And hopefully, maybe here in the next week or so, Aspen will have a new video. We're still working on that. But
no, actually, we got that together Friday morning.
Oh,
Brett is now a legally licensed driver in the state of Texas, which has taken over a year for that to happen now.
Yes.
And it is quite the drama to get your driver's license here in Texas. He actually had to take the driving test.
Yeah, written and driving.
But he did it, and here he is.
If you ever move to Texas, don't let your license be expired. Because if you have to get a new license or even transfer your license, make sure you get your certified birth certificate, not a copy. The first thing, you have to get there early in the morning, because if you try to schedule one, it's like 2-3 months out. Mm-hmm. So you call and try to get online and try to schedule your appointment. You're a couple of months out at least before you can even go in. Unless you go early in the morning, like I'm thinking, they open at 8, and if you get there at 6:30, you have a shot at getting in.
Yeah, I took him at 6:30 or 6:15 in the morning so that I could have the car to take Aspen to school. Mm-hmm. And so we were sitting in the car talking for a little while till it actually got a little daylight out. Yeah. And it was an entirely different subject basically, and I was like, that's it, that's the point to the unforgiving servant.
Yep.
We may have to do the unfaithful servant next weekend, because that's the one I keep wanting to mention.
But yeah, it was fun, and it was an all-day affair too, because normally you go in at 6:30 in the morning, and then the first thing they tell you, do you have your birth certificate, certified copy? And if you don't, they just tell you to leave. It's like, well, there's nothing you can do, because no matter what you're there to do, you have to have that. Texas wants to know you were born in the U.S. and can prove it. And then you generally just get a slip of paper that says come back at such and such time. You don't get to walk right in normally unless you're the first 1 or 2 people. So then you get your appointment for the day and you leave and you come back. And then I ended up doing the paperwork first, and then I had to take the written test, and then I had to leave, go watch an hour-long video online, print off the certificate, come back, take a driving test that, you know, they humiliate you for just because they look at you and go, why are you taking a driving test? Oh, you must have let your license expire too long and didn't do anything about it, so now you have to do all this stuff. So we're going to make you really work for this. And, but yeah, it took all day long to get it all done. And I'm not resentful at all about it because I'm not living in that past from Friday. I'm letting it go so it doesn't ruin my future experiences on the road. Darn them. But I have my license. Sort of. I have the paper that says I have a license. And they're still... And then, of all things, at the very end, when I go back, they couldn't find me in the system. And it's like, what happened? You were just here. Da, da, da. It turns out they had put in the wrong birth date.
Oh. Wow. Did you forgive them for that?
Yes. I have
From
totally
the heart.
forgiven them from the heart.
Jesus said we must forgive from the heart.
Anyway.
Yes.
I'm happy today. I'm happy today.
Okay. Well,
I'll let you sign off this
Now
time.
that we have bored you to tears, it was nice to see you. And we'll see you again next week.